Stepsister stole my fiancé and sent me postcards, rubbing it in. Now they're broke and begging me for a job at the family business she was supposed to inherit. Hello everyone. I, 28F, was engaged to my college boyfriend about 4 years ago. We'd been together throughout college and got engaged at 23. We were engaged for a year, but a week before our wedding, he ran off with my stepsister. My ex-fiancé, Greg, 28M, and my stepsister, Melissa, 28F, eloped a week before the wedding, leaving me nothing but a letter. In the letter, Greg mentioned that he'd started an affair with Melissa a couple of months after we got engaged. He said he realized he couldn't marry me because it would be unfair to all of us, especially Melissa, since they were the ones actually in love. He claimed the universe had used me to lead him to his true love, so he couldn't stay with me and cheat us all out of a happy future. And just like that, they were gone. I didn't see them again until recently. Greg's parents covered the entire cost of the wedding, and I didn't have to pay anything because they were so embarrassed by what their son had done. But that was pretty much the last interaction I had with his family. There was nothing left to say. My family, however, was more than embarrassed. My parents were livid. My dad even considered hiring a private detective to track them down and drag them back for answers. Just to clarify, my dad is technically my stepdad, but he's been my father since I was little. I've always called him Dad because, to me, he's my only father. I've never known my biological dad. He left shortly after I was born, signed away his rights, and my mom never saw him again. She married my dad when I was 8. Melissa and I used to go to the same school, which is how our parents met. For some reason, Melissa decided she didn't like me and treated me horribly for years. She was a bully in the truest sense of the word. She and her friends constantly picked on me at school, and it didn't stop when we got home. She'd seize every opportunity to make me feel bad. I complained to my parents multiple times, and they tried to reprimand her, but it wasn't enough. She wasn't scared of them, so the bullying continued. My school years were a total nightmare because of her and her cronies. Just like my biological dad wasn't in the picture, Melissa's mom wasn't around either. She had passed away a few years after Melissa was born. Her mom died in the middle of the night from an epileptic episode. Anytime my mum tried to discipline Melissa, she'd snap back, saying my mum had no right to scold her because she wasn't her real mum. My dad also tried to get her to stop bullying me, but nothing worked. She wasn't scared of anything. They tried everything, scolding, reasoning, even threatening to send her away, but she'd just dare them to do it, knowing they were empty threats. By middle school, Melissa only got worse. By high school, she was a full-blown juvenile delinquent. She started smoking, sneaking out to drink with her equally terrible friends, and even got arrested one night for breaking into someone's house while drunk. That was the final straw for my parents. After weeks of begging and protesting, they sent her to a rehab center for troubled teens. She wasn't happy about it, but my dad was firm. He told her if she wanted to live with us and be part of the family, she had to get better. He couldn't let her behavior continue. She was becoming a menace to society. She left during our sophomore year and didn't come back until after we graduated. She enrolled in a school near the rehab center and lived with her aunt. I didn't see Melissa for those couple of years, mostly because I wasn't interested in how my biggest bully was doing. My parents visited her every weekend and would ask if I wanted to come along, but my answer was always no. Her friends started ignoring me and pretended like I didn't exist after she left, which improved my high school experience considerably. Finally, I didn't have anyone bullying me constantly. Melissa continued her education in rehab, and when she came back, the first thing she did was apologize for everything she'd put me through. She seemed calmer, and I actually thought she'd changed for the better. So, like a fool, I forgave her. We were about to go off to college in a few months anyway, so it didn't matter much. Once we started college, I moved out, and so did she. We'd only come back for the holidays. After that, she was much nicer to me. And by nicer, I don't mean she was kind or friendly. She just ignored me instead of picking on me every chance she got, like she used to. Honestly, it was a welcome change. I'd rather be ignored than bullied. Our parents noticed this, but didn't try to force us to get along or act like sisters. Given our history, this was more than good enough. Then I started dating Greg. After being together for a year, I brought him home for Thanksgiving to introduce him to my parents. Everyone got along really well, and for the first time, I noticed Melissa taking an interest in the conversation, a rare occurrence since she'd come back from rehab. She and Greg actually seemed to hit it off. After I started dating Greg, Melissa began expressing more interest in being friends with me. She'd reach out to talk, which she'd never done before. I didn't understand what was going on, and I had a tiny suspicion that maybe she had a thing for Greg. So, one day, I asked her if the real reason she was trying to be friends with me was because of him. She laughed and told me that wasn't the case. Greg had mentioned what a great relationship he had with his siblings during our first dinner together, and that had made her rethink how she'd been treating me. She said she'd held me responsible for being sent away for the longest time, but had come to terms with the fact that it wasn't my fault. She'd brought it on herself with her terrible behavior. She said it was time she stopped punishing me and started trying to be part of the family. I'm an emotional fool, and what she said that day touched me. So, like an idiot, I decided to forgive her and be friends with her. And I guess that's what hurt the most, because she betrayed me after we became friends. We were on good terms for a long time, and she was actively involved in the wedding prep. I wouldn't say we were the best of friends, but we were better than we'd ever been. We'd meet at least once or twice a month and talk, so by the time I got engaged, we were doing well. I'd introduced her to Greg in person before the engagement, and whenever we met at family events, they behaved normally. I never suspected anything because I had no reason to. Even after the engagement, they continued to act like nothing was going on. Not for a second did I think Greg had a thing for Melissa. It never occurred to me because Greg put on a convincing act of being in love with me the entire time he was cheating on me with her. And Melissa was just as convincing at pretending to be my friend. I didn't find out the truth until it was too late. They were already gone. My parents wanted to track them down and bring them back, but I convinced them to leave it alone. I just wanted to forget about everything. It was bad enough that the two of them had made a complete fool out of me and run away a week before my wedding. I didn't want more drama. I was depressed and didn't have it in me. For the next couple of weeks, I did nothing but work and sleep, avoiding my feelings. My heart was broken and I was numb. But the worst was yet to come. A couple of weeks after my supposed wedding day, I received a postcard from Melissa. She was in California, and she'd included photos of her and Greg, looking really happy. It was obvious she was rubbing it in my face. She even wrote that she was sorry about the surprise before the wedding, but it was clear she wasn't sorry at all. It was meant to anger me. That's when I realized she'd never forgiven me for what happened all those years ago. She still held me responsible for being sent away and had never wanted to be my friend. She'd just used me to get to Greg. It was a diabolical plan, and I'll give her credit for that. For days after she sent that postcard, I couldn't sleep. I was losing my mind. It was a traumatic experience, and I had to get therapy for months to undo the damage and deal with my trust issues. The postcard wasn't a one-off incident either. She sent me postcards of her and Greg for months after that. It only stopped after about a year because I didn't respond or play into the drama. Our parents were furious and cut all ties with her after the first postcard. That was a huge loss for Melissa because she was set to inherit our dad's business. She was a business major and had chosen that route specifically to join him. But after what she'd done, our father cut her off and told me I could join him instead. He felt he had to make up for everything in a major way. I didn't have a business degree. I was a history major, so I needed to learn the ropes. My dad said it wasn't a problem and was willing to teach me everything he knew so I could eventually take over the business instead of Melissa. I agreed and started working under him. I worked really hard for a couple of years, and last year I was finally promoted. My father retired, and it was an amazing feeling. I'd started from scratch and had to learn everything, but now everything was smooth sailing under me. Thanks to me, my parents can spend more time together without worrying about the business. Because I'm taking care of it, it's been this way for quite a while. I pretty much stopped thinking about Greg after I started working for my father. That, along with therapy, helped me move on. I'd say now I've completely moved on and don't think about them or what they did. I never thought they'd ever reach out to me again, let alone ask for my help. It would take a lot of guts and an utter lack of functioning brain cells to ask me for help after they screwed me over, made a fool out of me, and then rubbed it in my face. But I guess Melissa and Greg really do lack brain cells because that's exactly what they did. A few days back, I was at home. It was the weekend, and around lunchtime I heard someone frantically ringing my doorbell. I thought it was the pizza I'd ordered, so I didn't think much of it. When I opened the door, I got the biggest surprise of my life. Instead of a delivery guy, I found Melissa standing outside my house, looking really worried. I didn't know what to say, so I just silently waited for her to speak. As I looked at her, I realized she was definitely here to ask for help. She looked destitute, and her appearance gave her away. Even as a kid, Melissa always dressed well, but now she was wearing old, faded clothes that had obviously been purchased a long time ago. Her jeans were way too short, and she looked like she hadn't been eating properly. I'd already made up my mind that whatever she was about to ask, the answer was going to be no. She told me she needed my help because she and Greg had been struggling for a long time. Ever since he lost his job a couple of months ago, he'd started drinking instead of looking for a new one. Melissa had been trying to find a job herself, but she couldn't. She'd quit everything to stay at home and handle all the household work when she first moved away with Greg. Because of that, she hadn't worked in years, and the gap in her resume made her a weaker candidate for all the jobs she'd been applying to. She said she'd heard from a couple of relatives that our father had retired and handed over the reins of the business to me. Now, she was here to ask if I'd be willing to hire Greg and give him something to do. Melissa told me she'd come all this way just to ask for my help. She said she was sorry for what she'd done in the past, but was counting on me to bail her out. She hadn't even approached our parents yet and had come straight to my house because she knew I had a kind heart. She felt guilty about betraying me, but was sure I wouldn't turn her away now that she needed my help. Her entitlement was so ridiculous that I ended up laughing in her face. I told her to apply somewhere else because I don't hire cheaters. Then I shut the door and walked back into the living room, preparing to call the cops if she didn't leave soon. Thankfully, she did go away that day, but she hasn't left me alone since. After her visit, the first thing I did was call our parents and tell them about it. They said they'd heard from a couple of neighbors that Melissa was back in town without Greg, but they hadn't brought it up. We live in a relatively small town, so everybody knows everybody. We quickly found out Melissa had been here for about a week before she finally paid me a visit. She'd been staying with one of her high school cronies. It was probably her high school friend who told her where I lived and about the fact that I'd inherited the business that was rightfully supposed to be hers. Now, she was really milking that. A couple of days after she visited me, Melissa decided to go meet our parents to tell them how heartless I was being. She had expected them to be on her side now that she had the upper hand in who was suffering more. But she couldn't have been more mistaken. My father told her that the business was now mine to run, and I could make whatever decisions I deemed fit. He didn't have any say in it anymore because he wasn't going to micromanage me. My mother reminded her that she was the one who had screwed me over by running away with my fiancé after pretending to be my friend for years. Now, she completely deserved whatever was happening to her. She had lost the right to ask any of us for help, especially me, after she'd even been sending me postcards to torment me. She tried to defend herself by saying it was all in the past and that she was a different person now. But my parents told her to leave because they wanted nothing to do with her anymore. That led to her throwing a tantrum at their house, claiming they had always favored me over her and treated me like the golden child. She told my father that, in spite of being his own flesh and blood, he had never treated her like that. She accused him of acting as if I was his only daughter, and she was worth nothing to him. When he told her he had made more allowances for her behavior in the past than any other parent in the world would, she said it still didn't matter. I had everything that was supposed to be hers, including the business I was showing off about. She said it wasn't even her fault that Greg had fallen for her and wanted to spend his life with her instead of me, but for some reason, she was the one being punished for it. She claimed the postcards she'd sent were meant to be a genuine apology and that she wasn't trying to torment me. Honestly, I haven't been able to stop thinking about that since my father told me what she said. In a way, it's true that she was supposed to inherit this business and be in my place, but she really lost it because of her own actions. I had no part to play in that. I never told my father to cut her out of his life and hand over the business to me. He did it of his own volition. It feels kind of unfair for her to blame me for this. Also, the thing she said about me being the golden child is absolutely not true, but I can see why she would feel that way. In her head, she was the one who was sent away because I complained about her and her incessant bullying. A parent deciding to send their kid away is a really big deal, and I know it was rough on my father, but again, that's not his fault, or my fault. If he hadn't taken the necessary steps to prevent it, Melissa might have turned out to be a criminal or something. That's the way she was going. Apart from that, I don't really think she was trying to apologize with the postcards. She was probably just trying to cover it up by saying it was supposed to be a genuine apology. I just feel bad for her because her husband turned out to be completely useless, and now she has to bail him out. It must have been incredibly difficult for her to come to me, and I can't imagine how hard that was. So, I kind of regret treating her the way I did. I have everything now, and she has nothing, so I can't help but feel sorry for her. That's just who I am as a person. Besides, it's been a long time, and I don't feel like holding on to that grudge anymore. But I also don't want to help her out in any way. The most I can do is give them my sympathy. I really don't want to hire them or help them out with money. I think it's enough that I even feel bad for her after everything she put me through. Most people probably wouldn't. The only reason I even feel bad for her right now is because this business was actually supposed to be hers, and now that I'm in a position of power, I'm finally getting back at her. I just feel like it's not right. It might be because of what she said about me being the golden child, or maybe it's just plain old imposter syndrome, but I feel weird about this. So I asked for advice about refusing to hire my ex-fiancé, who eloped with my stepsister, now that they're struggling with money. Hello everyone. To keep this video going, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and helps us continue bringing you great stories. So, if you enjoy our content, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support makes a huge difference. Alright, let's keep going. Update 1. I didn't have any idea what to do, and the comments here just confused me even more. Some of you said I was doing the right thing by turning them away, and the other half said I had always been the golden child, which is why Melissa started to act out. This wasn't as helpful as I thought it was going to be. I decided to talk to my parents because every single time I've had to face problems in my life, I've always approached them for advice. I did the same this time as well. They told me I had no reason to feel sorry for Melissa because everybody had gone above and beyond to try and make her a better person. But if she wasn't willing to turn over a new leaf at any point in her life, then there wasn't much we could do for her. My father told me he had every intention of letting her take over the business had she behaved herself and been a good daughter. But she failed at everything and made a total mockery out of our family. After that, she'd be a fool to expect him to let her take over or even be a part of the family anymore. That made me feel considerably better because talking to my parents always does. So I'll try not to let myself feel guilty about things I don't control anymore. Update 2. About a week has passed since Melissa showed up at my door and since her visit to my parents. We hadn't heard from her, and I almost thought she had gone back to California to be with Greg, until today. She showed up at my workplace to make a scene. It was horrible. She just walked into the place like she owned it. She knew the ins and outs ever since she was a child, so she got in without alerting security quite easily. Then, she planted herself in front of my office and started shouting about how I had stolen the business from right under her nose. She accused me of pretending to be a good little girl for our parents and constantly being a bootlicker so they would approve of me. Apparently, I was also responsible for vilifying her by falsely accusing her of bullying me throughout our childhood and even talking my father into sending her to rehab, all just to cement my position as the golden child of the family. She went on to announce that this business was supposed to be hers, but now I was refusing to even let her be a part of it because I was jealous that Greg had chosen her over me. Unlike our parents, who had always favored me, she claimed I couldn't handle being overlooked and lost my mind, turning our parents against her. When I heard the yelling, I decided to go out and check it out for myself after calling security. I tried to tell her to shut up, but she went on for a good few minutes until she was finally thrown out of the building. I decided to call my dad before calling the cops to get his opinion, and he was furious. He told me to go right ahead and call the police. Thankfully, when the cops showed up, she was still lurking nearby, probably waiting for me to leave the building so she could yell at me, or maybe do something worse, like physically attack me. The cops took her away and charged her with trespassing and disturbing the peace. They're minor charges, and she can probably get off with just a fine or maybe community service at worst, but it's certainly going on record, and that's never good. I told my dad she had been charged and arrested, and I expected him to be a little upset about it. But he only seemed exasperated and told me he was just tired of this and wanted a break from having to deal with her insanity. I honestly feel bad for him because it can't be easy having a daughter like Melissa and being blamed for everything that goes wrong in her life, even though most of the time it's her own fault. Honestly, we've all been really patient. Update 3. Okay, so I think Melissa has returned to California because it's been a couple of days and we haven't heard from her. Which is weird because we expected her to lash out at us after her arrest, but my dad asked around and was told that a couple of people saw her heading toward the airport the other day. So, I'm assuming she's left. It's honestly a huge relief that she's gone now because I was genuinely afraid she was going to try to do something explosive to get our attention next. And that's always bad news. I don't know what she's going to do about the whole situation with Greg now because it seems unlikely she's going to get help from anyone else after this. I just hope she finds something to do and gets out of this mess. And no, I'm not even being kind or compassionate right now. I have very selfish reasons to say this. It's because I know that if she doesn't find a way out of this mess, she'll just come back here with Greg and bother us some more. And I don't want that. So, I genuinely hope and pray that either she or Greg finds a job and is able to support themselves. Either way, I don't have to hear from her for a couple of weeks at least, and I'm choosing to believe that this nightmare is over now.